We're making this video for one reason and one reason only. Because Toronto is the center of the hockey universe, is it not? So, we've been talking about Montreal Canadiens defenseman Ben Chiarot for quite a while now, going over his entire profile, going over the status of this guy. He's a pending UFA who's making $3.5 million a season, and because he is on a very bad Montreal Canadiens team, as well as the fact that last season in the playoffs, going to the finals, he was one of the better shutdown defensive defensemen on that squad, there is indeed a market that is picked up for Ben Chiarot that includes the likes of teams like the Florida Panthers, the St. Louis Blues, and the Washington Capitals too. We've discussed the idea of Ben Chiarot going to any of these teams, not because he's a top point producer, that's really not what his profile is about. He's got 8 points in 36 games played this season, so even though he is on pace for about, let's say, less than 20 points, you're getting this guy pretty much for his shutdown capabilities, for his poise in the postseason to be able to just neutralize offending opposition and do so on a very consistent basis. He only had 2 points in the playoff run when the Canadiens went to the finals in 22 games, but he was one of the most effective players on the squad because they just played a very specific system that tailored that sort of playing style to guys like Edvinsson, Chiarot, and Weber. Unfortunately, though, the Habs sucks this year, so any prolonged discussion about what the Canadiens are going to do in the next few months, none of it revolves around the playoffs. The Habs just aren't good enough of a team this season, and so when you think about the long-term implications of this team, you instead start to think about trades and where these players on the Montreal Canadiens today could end up when the season ends. Ben Chiarot is the prime trade target this team has because he is a guy who expires this season, so as a rental, for any team to go out there looking for a shutdown defenseman who can play big minutes, Ben Chiarot is likely your guy. Which is why we go over to the center of the hockey world. Let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs, because when it comes to Leafs Nation, everybody and their mother goes out there and speculates any potential trade candidate heading over to Toronto. It's just kind of a fact of life that if you go over onto Toronto Twitter, Toronto Instagram, Toronto radio, Toronto media, you're going to go out there and see a lot of people say, oh, we should trade for this guy, oh, we should get that guy, oh, we should get this other player over here. Anybody whose name even enters the trade target conversation, usually in some form or another, gets linked to Toronto. Now, it's kind of funny, because Toronto does sort of have themselves a need for defense. When you think about the Toronto Maple Leafs and the discourse that goes amongst the fan base, you'll see conversations going about Josh Manson of the Ducks, John Klingberg of the Dallas Stars, defensemen around the NHL that could be up for grabs. And Ben Chiarot, oddly enough, has been one that we have sort of avoided this entire time. We've talked about the Rangers, we've talked about the Oilers, we've talked about the Panthers and the Capitals and the Blues, but not Toronto. In fact, now it's actually time to bring up that Maple Leafs team, and it's all thanks to Darren Dreger. He said this on TSN 1050 today. He said that Chiarot would make sense for Toronto. Montreal is going to trade Ben Chiarot to the team that is going to pay the most, and it doesn't matter that it's Toronto. It really doesn't. They've got bigger fish to fry in Montreal than worrying about helping the Maple Leafs. He also says that Josh Manson is another name. What they're doing with him in Anaheim, I'd have eyes on him. Again, he can play whatever style you want. Expiring contracts are important. And so now, you think about what Darren Dreger said on the radio as to whether or not the Canadiens would make a trade with Toronto involving a Ben Chiarot. This is honestly like the first time I've even thought about the idea that Montreal would not want to make a trade with the Leafs just because it's the Leafs. Like, is that kind of surprising to anybody else who is hearing this for the first time? Oh, Darren Dreger had to bring it up that it's not important that the Canadiens could potentially be helping out Toronto in a trade with a Ben Chiarot attached to it. And it's like, okay, duh. That's why you trade players to other teams, because you're helping that team out and you're getting assets in return. That's kind of why the trade process is the way it is. And like, I don't really think the Montreal Canadiens really care anymore, because it's not like they're going to be playing Toronto in the postseason like they were last year. The entire, oh, they should be discouraged from trading with this team to help this other team out is like completely asinine at this point, because the Montreal Canadiens are done this year. Like, they are not going to make the playoffs. So that notion that Darren Dreger brought up, personally, I don't really see the value in thinking about things like that. But on the other hand, if the Toronto Maple Leafs do believe that is the case, if they think, okay, Montreal has this defenseman that we want to get because he's cheap, he's expiring, yada yada yada, and they don't want to trade with us because we're Toronto, we gotta up a potential return, then hey, be my guest. If the Toronto Maple Leafs feel like they need to add more to get the Montreal Canadiens to actually trade with the Leafs with Ben Chiarot, then yeah, that'd be cool. Add on some more draft picks, add on some more prospects, add on all this other stuff that has been speculated a Ben Chiarot could go for. Elliot Friedman said that Ben Chiarot could probably fetch a first in his mind, and if the Toronto Maple Leafs give up their first-round pick to Montreal for Chiarot, just imagine the range of where that pick could be. If the Maple Leafs blow it and lose in the first round again, you're probably looking at, I don't know, a pick that's in the 20s, early 20s, late teens. If the Maple Leafs actually win a round, which they're capable of doing, but as we have seen over the past few years, just hasn't happened yet, that pick could probably be a little bit later. But at the same time, Elliotte Friedman noted that first-round price for Ben Chiarot a few months ago. Darren Dreger is highlighting here, if Toronto feels like they need to up the price in order to get this guy, then they're going to do it. So maybe we're looking at a first, maybe we're looking at another draft pick as well, maybe we're looking at a prospect. And for Montreal, I mean, you take a look at what Kent Hughes is going to be doing here. Analytics are a very big part of what the Canadiens are going to try to bring here. And when it comes to analytics, no better place to look for analytics than the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is a team that, ignited by Kyle Dubas's hockey mind, has pretty much been focusing on analytics the past few years. So Toronto makes sense as a trade partner just considering what the Canadiens value in terms of what Kent Hughes said is probably going to be the focus here, as well as what the Toronto Maple Leafs already have. They have prospects and they have players that have done really well analytically, which is why the Maple Leafs in all these projected models, you take a look at the playoff odds and everything, Toronto is always seen as a favorite, even though they always find crazy voodoo ways to lose in the postseason. So who knows if a defensive-minded Ben Chiarot is all they need to get over that hump, although I will say it's likely not. Just based off of my understanding in hockey, I personally don't think one player, especially if Ben Chiarot is that player, is good enough or impactful enough to change the entire outcome of a playoff series, but if the Maple Leafs work their system around this guy and they play him a significant amount of minutes and just allow him to do his thing, then who knows if distributing the ice time could benefit guys like Morgan Rielly and all that too. It's kind of up in the air how this would go down. Of course, though, there are indeed other defensemen that have been conversed about when it comes to Maple Leafs' potential trade targets. John Klingberg is probably the one with the most star power behind his name out of Dallas because he's been kind of on the block too. Not to mention, of course, Josh Manson, whom Darren Dreger lays out specifically here in the radio hit. I will say this right away, though. If you want to make a trade for a defenseman, Ben Chiarot is probably going to be cheaper than a Manson or a Klingberg. So, Kyle, I'd appreciate it if you just kind of kept that in the back of your mind, right? It might not be that high, the price for Ben Chiarot, but at least there will be somewhat of a bidding war to the point where you could actually see good value coming back from Montreal. So if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, talk to me in the comments below. What would it be that, should Toronto go out there and acquire a Ben Chiarot, you would want to see as a return? You would likely have a first-round pick there at the minimum because of what Elliotte Friedman said earlier this year. Or should I say last year, because he said that in 2021, right? But which prospects are there on your radar? Which other draft picks could be on the radar too? Is it a defenseman that you want back? Because, hey, if you trade away a Ben Chiarot, there indeed is a hole on the D-core that you're opening up there. Do you want to get a defenseman back, or somebody that could probably blossom into something else later? Kent Hughes said that he thinks there are indeed like 2 people on the Canadiens that could probably be built around in the future. So, do you want to go out there, maybe try to get yourselves another one of those pieces if it's even possible? Also, if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, talk to me in the comments, would you want a Ben Chiarot from Montreal? You saw how this guy played in the postseason last year. You had 7 games to see him in the postseason last year. And that was up close and personal. The rest of the playoff run was indeed broadcasted here in Canada, so a lot of Leafs fans probably are familiar with the body of work Ben Chiarot has had. Do you need a player like this? Do you need a shutdown defenseman who could play 25-plus minutes a night, who is probably not going to go out there and score too many points, but who will likely have a pretty stable spot on the back end? Is this the kind of player you would really benefit from? Or do you want more of the offensive flair that a John Klingberg has, or the versatility of a Josh Manson? Talk to me in the comments on your thoughts about Ben Chiarot and the Canadiens trade down below. Also, what would you be willing to give up for a player like Ben Chiarot? If the price starts out at a first plus, is that something you're willing to do? I know a lot of Leafs fans probably don't care too much about your draft picks anymore because you're kind of in that position as a team where you need to win now. Like, at the very least, win at least one playoff round. It's been inexcusable for this long. So, is that first-round pick just like candy that you can throw away and say, okay, here, give us the Ben Chiarot, here's our first-round pick and something else? So, talk to me in the comments on your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this 99, and bye.